So tonight our guest is Maria Tomchick. Maria is a contributor to Eat the State newspaper and also a commentator and contributor to Eat the Airwaves. Everyone please welcome Maria Tomchick.
Thank you. Hi. I'm going to talk a little bit about the economy tonight. How many people have been following the whole subprime mortgage crisis? A few people. Anybody want to hear a little bit more about it? How we got into it? Maybe you're familiar with how, starting with the Reagan administration, the government started to deregulate the banking industry, allowing banks to own mortgage companies and allowing major corporations to open and run their own kind of financing for loans so that people could buy their cars and their other products, etc. That was all part of a way that the government had figured out if we loosen credit terms and allow it to make it a little bit easier for everybody to borrow, so to make it easier for people to get auto loans, to make it easier for people to get credit cards, including people who had never had them before or who were under certain income limits that would have allowed them to get credit cards in the past. If we make it easier for people to get mortgage loans and we allow lending agencies to come up with these special products, we soften the rules a little bit so they can come up with these special products like borrowing to make a down payment, or so that then you can go to a mortgage company and say, oh, I've got cash for a down payment now. Do I qualify for a mortgage? You know, then they could get a nice mortgage for a house, and even sometime, and in some cases that we've seen in the last 5 years or so, making it so that people can buy more house than they could have afforded in the past. Well, we're starting to see now what some of the fallout is from that and how that's come about. We see now that the mortgage companies have come up with things like subprime loans, which have always existed, but they were always a very tiny part of the market. And there was a reason for that. It was hard for people to get subprime loans because there were rules about what you had to do. You had to come to Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, and you had to have 3% of a down payment in order to get a subprime mortgage, and then it would be through the government, and they would track you very closely to make sure you were making payments, and when you couldn't, they would help you refinance, etc. Well, now they made it so that anybody could make subprime mortgages, and you didn't have to follow all those rules. And then lending companies came up with these other products, including something that when I read about it, I was scandalized. An Alt-A mortgage. You could, they're not making them anymore, but you could, up until last year, go to a lending organization, a mortgage broker who offers Alt-A mortgage, and you could just sit there and tell him what your income was and what your assets were, and you didn't have to provide any proof. You didn't have to give him a pay stub or anything. No, you just dress in a nice suit and you go in and you say, I own 2 houses already, one's a rental property, my income is $100,000 a year. And they'd say, great, you sign a paper that attests to that fact and we'll lend you money. And they called those Alt-A mortgages. A lot of Alt-A mortgages have not come due yet, or they have not adjusted. So we don't know how many of those are out there for people who are going to default on them, but they do make up a portion of the subprime loans and other loans that people have defaulted on. The lenders called those Alt-A mortgages real estate investor style loans. So they tended to give them to people who were buying houses as investment properties. So you look at our market, this region of Seattle, Bellevue, this whole Puget Sound area, where housing prices have skyrocketed in the last few years in particular. And you can say, well, if it was so easy for real estate investors to get these loans, these Alt-A mortgages, wouldn't that have an impact on the housing supply? Okay, and if it has an impact on the housing supply and there are fewer and fewer houses for, say, first-time home buyers to buy, wouldn't that drive the prices up? Well, yeah. And if you drive the prices up, well, if you look at it from the real estate broker's perspective, that's great because that's a higher fee for them every time they sell a house. And if you drive the prices up, it's also great for the mortgage broker or the lending company because they get a higher fee if they can lend out more money, they get more back in interest plus fees. So really there was no incentive for the industry to police itself. And these Alt-A mortgages help to drive up the prices of houses around here. And I take that particularly to heart because in 2006 I was trying to buy a condo, and I found that I was really, really priced out of the market. And I was shocked at some of the loans that mortgage brokers were offering and some of the things that real estate brokers were telling me about how safe it was to take out an adjustable rate mortgage. And this was last year when adjustable rate mortgages, when we were first starting to hear about problems with adjustable rate mortgages and defaults in the subprime market. That was starting last year. And right in the middle of that, I went to a free class and I had a mortgage broker tell me, nobody stays in a house for longer than 3 years. You're going to want to sell and move up, or you're going to want to refinance. And it'll be easy to refinance because the value of your home will go up. Not it may go up. She said it will go up. Well, what do we know about that? Here in the Seattle area, I've got some little numbers I'm going to look at here from time to time. We're being told by the Bush administration that the housing market is kind of operating in isolation and it's not having any impact on the rest of the economy. The rest of the economy is roaring along. It's really strong. There's no problem, right? It's just a perception problem that people have. Well, you could say that to people whose mortgages have adjusted upwards already and they're paying more than half their income in mortgage payments. You can say that to them and they'll say, well, I'll tell you it's more than a perception problem, But here, and we're being told too that the softness in the housing market or places where prices have fallen are just isolated areas around the country, California, Las Vegas, Nevada, Florida. We're told that those are the worst spots. Everywhere else is fine. Yeah, right. Okay? And that Seattle has the strongest housing. We're told that Seattle has probably the strongest housing market. And in fact, just earlier this year, magazines like Fortune magazine and Forbes, they would come out with these articles saying, the rip-roaring Seattle housing market, or the place to invest, Seattle. So, and I mean, that doesn't help the prices here any. If you're looking, you're a first-time home buyer, you're looking.
Smart money's getting out. When they start writing those articles, that the smart money is looking for somebody to offer.
Yeah, they're looking to try and get people to buy while the price is at its peak. And that's what it was this year, because in August, we saw that median home prices in Seattle just topped $500,000, so $501,000 for the median house in Seattle. 2 months later, the median house price in October was $396,250. And and that was just reported here in the Seattle papers, and they reported it by saying housing prices have dropped a little bit. Year over year. So they were comparing October of this year to October of 2006. And the reason they do that is because housing prices do vary from month to month, because it's true more people look for houses to buy in the summer than they do in the winter. More people want to move in the summer than they do in the winter. However, it's not the winter in October. You'd call it late summer, early fall. Usually the housing market should still be going along at a pretty good clip. Well, in 2 months' time, to see a 21% drop in housing prices, I think is pretty drastic. And we're not seeing that reported even in the local papers, much less the national press, that the softness in the national housing market has finally reached us, and there's really no place in the country that is doing that great. What we also know is we can look at foreclosures. That's an indication, too, of how the housing market is doing around the country. We know that foreclosures this year are up 100% all over the U.S., so approximately doubled in a year's time. We know that here in Washington State, they're up 41.8%, and in King County, it's 33%, just in King County. So we know that we're feeling it, and somebody's feeling it. When people are going into foreclosure, it means